The 10 toughest black actors in Hollywood history. It will shock you. Hollywood sells toughness with lighting, music, and stunts. But what if I told you some of the hardest men ever put on screen were forged in real prisons, real street wars, real poverty, and real near-death battles long before fame found them? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 black legends whose lives were so brutal, so disciplined, and so unbelievable that their movies feel almost tame in comparison. And trust me, at least one name will shock you. If you're ready for stories Hollywood never dares to tell, hit like, subscribe, and join Legends of Black Excellence, because this list isn't just entertainment, it's survival history. Mr. T. In any countdown of the 10 toughest black actors in Hollywood history, there is one name that doesn't just appear. It explodes onto the list: Mr. T. Born Lawrence Terode, in Chicago's notorious Robert Taylor Homes. He grew up in an environment where toughness wasn't a choice. It was a survival instinct. Sharing a tiny apartment with 11 siblings, he learned early that life demanded strength, discipline, and resilience. As a teenager, he became a standout wrestler and earned a football scholarship, but it was the streets, not sports, that carved the steel into him. Every day was a test of grit, shaping a young man whose presence alone made trouble think twice. That presence only deepened when he joined the U.S. Army in the mid-1970s. There, he quickly rose above thousands of recruits, gaining a reputation for unmatched endurance and razor-sharp discipline. After his service, he entered one of the roughest proving grounds in American nightclub security. Chicago's Rush Street was infamous for brawls, gangs, and chaos, but it was also where the legend of Mr. T was born. He reportedly handled hundreds of violent encounters, always walking away with the same message: he didn't start fights, but he finished them. His gold chains, worn like trophies around his neck, became a symbol of his fearlessness. From that reputation came a new career path: elite bodyguarding. For nearly a decade, Mr. T protected some of the most recognizable figures in the world: Muhammad Ali, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Steve McQueen, among others. These were clients who hired him not for show, but for certainty. If Mr. T walked into a room, the room became safe. His reputation as the toughest bouncer in America eventually landed him on televised tough man competitions, where his raw intensity and intimidating aura caught Hollywood's attention. Producers weren't just impressed, they were stunned. When Sylvester Stallone cast him as Clubber Lang in Rocky III, it wasn't because he needed an actor. It was because he needed a real threat, someone audiences would genuinely believe could break Rocky Balboa. Mr. T didn't act tough. He was tough. That performance launched him into global fame, followed by his iconic role as B.A. Baracus in The A-Team, a character who blended brute force with deep morality and fierce loyalty. For millions, he became the face of unshakable strength. And that is why, when talking about Hollywood's toughest black actors, Mr. T isn't just a contender, he is the standard. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes doesn't just play dangerous men, he carries the kind of real-life edge that makes Hollywood action feel believable. Born in 1962 in Orlando and raised in the hard-knuckled world of the South Bronx, he grew up where confidence had to be earned and weakness got tested fast. While other kids were figuring out how to fit in, Snipes was figuring out how to survive. By age 12, he was already deep into martial arts, and that path never became a hobby. It became his foundation. He trained for decades, earning a 5th-degree black belt in Shotokan Karate and a 2nd-degree black belt in Hapkido, along with serious experience in capoeira, kung fu, and kickboxing. That's not movie training. That's a lifetime of discipline stamped into muscle memory. When Snipes hit the screen in the early 90s, you could tell immediately he moved different. In New Jack City, 1991, he wasn't just charismatic, he was cold, precise, and commanding. White Men Can't Jump. 1992 and Demolition Man 1993 proved he could be funny, sharp, and physically electric without losing authority. But the true shockwave came in 1998 with Blade. Before the MCU was a household phrase, Snipes led a major superhero film as a black action hero doing much of the high-speed combat himself. The sword work, the snapping kicks, the predatory calm, all of it landed because the man behind it was a legit martial artist, not a stunt-dependent actor. Blade didn't just entertain, it kicked open a door for black leads in modern action cinema. What makes a toughest actors list honest is how it handles the hard chapters, and Snipes has them. At the height of his fame, he ran headfirst into a tax scandal that could have ended everything. Federal prosecutors charged him in 2006. A jury convicted him in 2008 for willfully failing to file tax returns, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He ultimately served about 28 months before being released in April 2013. That kind of fall crushes most stars. But Snipes stayed in fighting shape, kept his discipline, and refused to disappear. Whether you see that era as mistake or tragedy, the toughness is that he didn't let it define his ending. And the comeback is the proof. After prison, he returned to the screen with the steady grind of a man rebuilding brick by brick. The Expendables 3 2014 scene-stealing work, In Dolomite Is My Name, 2019, and a crowd-pleasing turn in Coming 2, America, 2021. Then came the full circle moment. Fans never expected Snipes stepping back into the black leather as Blade in Deadpool and Wolverine 2024, decades after he first made the character iconic. At an age when most action stars are long retired, he reminded everyone what real toughness looks like. Skill that's earned pride, that's tested, and a will strong enough to take the hit, absorb it, and walk back into the fight. Yaphet Kotto. Yaphet Kotto is the kind of actor who didn't need to raise his voice to dominate a room. At 6'4", about 1.93 meters, with a slow, watchful stare, he carried a presence that felt like it had been lived in long before a camera ever found him. Born November 15, 1939 in New York City, Kotto came up in an era when black men were expected to shrink themselves for white comfort. He didn't. The toughness people remember in him wasn't a Hollywood trick. It was a lifetime of holding your ground in a country that constantly asked you to step back. He trained as a stage actor, first working Broadway and serious theater, while many performers chased easier film money. That choice matters because it shows the kind of strength that doesn't come from fists, it comes from pride. The transcript says he moved around street groups in his youth and lived close to violence. What we can say for sure is that he grew up in a hard New York environment during the 1940s-50s, and he brought that wary realism into every role. His style was never flashy. It was controlled, like a man who doesn't need to prove himself because he already knows what he's capable of. Hollywood truly felt Kotto's steel in the 1970s. In Live and Let Die 1973, he played Bond villain Dr. Kananga, Mr. Big, not with comic book theatrics, but with the cold calm of someone who believes power is his birthright. Then came Across 110th Street 1972, and other gritty films where he radiated a street-earned authority. But the performance that sealed his legend for generations, especially action and sci-fi fans, was Alien 1979. As Parker Kotto didn't act scared, he looked like a man who has seen real danger before and refuses to be broken by a new one. His fear felt adult, grounded, and unromantic, and that made the movie scarier. What makes Yaphet Kotto belong in a toughest black actors conversation is that his toughness was also moral. He consistently pushed back against roles he felt demeaned black people, choosing dignity over convenience, even when the industry offered him stereotypes wrapped in big paychecks. Later, he brought that same authority to TV as Lieutenant Al Jardello on Homicide: Life on the Street, 1993 to 1999, a role built on command, restraint, and inner fire. Kotto's toughness wasn't about who he could knock out. It was about who he refused to become, and the quiet, immovable strength he kept all the way to the end of his career. Fred Williamson. Fred, the Hammer. Williamson is the kind of name that sounds like a movie invention until you realize he earned it the hard way on real NFL fields, long before Hollywood ever rolled a camera. Born March 5, 1938 in Gary, Indiana. Williamson grew up in a rough working-class world where you learn to stand your ground or get pushed out of the way. He was a rare athlete who didn't just play football, he played it like a statement. By the time he reached the pros, he was already known for a fearless, aggressive style that made opponents hesitate. In the early 1960s, playing defensive back for the Oakland Raiders, Williamson became famous for his brutal forearm and elbow hits, legal at the time, terrifying to receive. That signature strike gave him the nickname, the Hammer. He wasn't the biggest man on the field, but he hit with the kind of conviction that rattled bigger bodies. He made 3 straight AFL All-Star teams, 1961 to 1963, and built a reputation as one of the league's most intimidating defenders. In an era when football was raw and unforgiving, Fred fit the moment perfectly, fast, mean, and utterly unafraid. When he retired from football, Williamson didn't leave toughness behind, he carried it straight into film. The 1970s blaxploitation era was hungry for black heroes who weren't submissive or comic relief, and Fred arrived like a wrecking ball. He wasn't trained by Hollywood stunt schools. He brought the logic of the gridiron into action cinema. On set, he pushed to do his own stunts, demanded fights look physical, and operated with the same authority he'd used against NFL offenses. In Black Caesar, 1973, Three the Hard Way, 1974, and later Original Gangsters, 1996, he didn't perform as a tough guy. He occupied the screen like one. Directors cast him because his swagger wasn't borrowed. It was ingrained. What makes Fred Williamson a true entry in any toughest black actors list isn't just the muscles or the roles. It's the mindset. He came from a world where respect was earned through impact, not talk. He treated Hollywood the way he treated the NFL. Don't try to control me, don't try to soften me, and don't expect me to play small. Fred's toughness was about self-determination, the refusal to be written into a corner by anyone else. In football, he hit like a hammer. In Hollywood, he lived like one. Jim Brown. Jim Brown wasn't just tough by Hollywood standards, he was tough by American life standards. Born on February 17, 1936, he grew up in a country that didn't make it easy for black men to be seen as powerful, let alone celebrated. By the time he reached the NFL, he looked like something the league had never fully dealt with, a fullback who ran with the force of a freight train and the speed of a sprinter. From 1957 to 1965 with the Cleveland Browns, Brown didn't simply dominate, he redefined what domination meant. In 9 seasons, he rushed for 12 to 312 yards, averaged an astonishing 5.2 yards per carry, scored 106 rushing touchdowns, made the Pro Bowl every single year, and won the league MVP 3 times. He retired while still on top, and at the moment he walked away, he held dozens of NFL records. But the shock isn't just the numbers, it's how he played. People who saw Jim Brown in his prime often describe the same scene, defenders meeting him head-on, bouncing off and watching him continue forward like nothing happened. In 1963, he posted 863 rushing yards in a 14-game season, a total so far ahead of his era that it still feels unreal today. The league had to build entire defensive game plans around one man, and even then it rarely worked. That kind of physical authority isn't athletic, it's mythic. And when Brown later stepped into film, that same authority followed him into the frame without any acting tricks. Hollywood first felt that power in The Dirty Dozen, 1967. Brown didn't arrive as a side character you could ignore. He arrived as a magnetic force, a black man who looked like he belonged at the center of danger, not the edge of the story. That mattered in a time when black actors were still boxed into narrow roles. In the early 1970s, he became one of the pillars of the blaxploitation era with films like Slaughter 1972 and Slaughter's Big Ripoff 1973, helping shape the image of the black action hero as fearless, capable, and untouchable. When he threw a punch or walked into a shootout on screen, audiences believed it because they'd already seen him run through grown men on Sundays. Brown's legacy, though, is complicated, and any honest, toughest list has to say that. His life included major achievements and serious controversies, including multiple arrests and allegations of violence over the years. Some cases were dismissed or settled, but the pattern became part of how the public understood him. In other words, his toughness wasn't a clean, polished Hollywood story. It was raw, human, and sometimes dark, the kind of real-world intensity that shaped both his legend and his criticism. Jim Brown remains a towering figure because he was never a manufactured tough guy. He was the original Storm, unstoppable on the field, commanding on-screen and impossible to reduce to a simple headline. Michael Jai White. Michael Jai White belongs on any list of Hollywood's toughest black actors because his toughness isn't a marketing angle, it's a lifetime of real combat discipline that just happens to translate perfectly to film. Born on November 10, 1967 in Brooklyn, and raised in tough neighborhoods where you learn to carry yourself with confidence, White found martial arts early and never let go. He started training as a child, eventually studying multiple systems seriously enough to earn black belts in more than one discipline. That matters because in an industry full of actors who learn choreography for a role, White is the rare case who arrived already dangerous. His movement has a calm, practiced sharpness you don't get from a stunt workshop. It comes from decades of real training. When Hollywood first noticed him, it wasn't because he looked tough. It was because he moved tough. In 1995, he played heavyweight champion Mike Tyson in the HBO film Tyson, a breakout that showed he could carry intensity without posing. Then, in 1997, White made history as the first black actor to lead a major theatrical superhero film starring in Spawn. The movie itself became a cult favorite, but the bigger point is what White represented: a black lead in a gritty physical superhero role at a time when studios still doubted that kind of casting could sell. He wasn't given the role to try something new. He was given it because he could make action feel real. That realism hit a new level with Undisputed 2. Last Man Standing 2006. As George Iceman Chambers White didn't just fight on camera, he fought with timing, weight transfer, and precision that made every exchange feel like an actual bout. Fans of modern martial arts cinema often point to that film as a benchmark for early 2000s fight choreography, and White is the reason why. He's known for performing much of his own action work, not out of ego, but because his skill level lets him deliver clean, believable violence without hiding behind cuts. Plenty of actors can look athletic in a wide shot. White can make the details convincing: the snap, the recoil, the control. But what seals his reputation as tough isn't just his resume. It's his attitude about the craft. White has always pushed for action to mean something, not just decorate a scene. He teaches, trains, and stays sharp like a career fighter even into his 50s, and he treats on-screen combat like a language that deserves respect. Over the years, he's become a quiet icon among action fans because he represents a dying standard. A performer who doesn't pretend to be a warrior, he is one. In a world of CGI heroes, Michael Jai White is the proof that genuine toughness still reads through the lens and always will. Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington's toughness doesn't come wrapped in muscles, tattoos, or a criminal backstory. It's the kind that walks in quietly, says almost nothing, and still makes the whole room straighten up. Born on December 28, 1954 in Mount Vernon, New York, Denzel grew up close enough to street violence to feel its heat. He has spoken over the years about watching friends drift into gangs, drugs, or prison, and about how his mother, terrified of losing him to that world, sent him away to a stricter private school. That move didn't make him soft, it made him sharper. He learned to read people, danger, and power early, and that kind of psychological armor never leaves you. Before Hollywood crowned him a legend, Denzel built his discipline the hard way through structure study and relentless standards. He didn't arrive as a flashy prodigy. He arrived as a worker with a fighter's mindset. At Fordham University and later in theater training, he developed the habit that still defines him: prepare like your life depends on it. For Denzel, acting was never pretending. It was understanding, digging into how real men think when their backs are against the wall. That's why his performances feel lived in. His toughness is rooted in credibility. You believe him because he believes the world he's stepping into. Look at the roles that built his reputation. In Glory 1989, he played Private Trip with a pride and fire that won him his first Oscar. In Malcolm X 1992, he carried the weight of a man evolving under pressure, turning conviction into a weapon. But the turn that etched quiet danger into pop culture was Training Day 2001. As Alonzo Harris, Denzel didn't need to shout to dominate. He used calm control, sudden ice-cold smiles, and the sense that violence was always one breath away. The performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, and more importantly, it reminded Hollywood that menace can be intellectual, not just physical. His toughness kept evolving. In Man on Fire 2004, he played grief and rage like they were twin engines, not emotions he had to fake. In American Gangster 2007 and the Equalizer series 2014 to 2023, he showed the older, deadlier kind of strength, a man who doesn't rush, doesn't posture, and never loses control. That control is the key. Denzel's characters are dangerous because they're disciplined. They don't swing first. They decide when to swing, and that decision feels final. He makes you feel that if he ever turns violent, it won't be messy, it will be precise. And off-screen, the same philosophy holds. Denzel is famously demanding not because he's difficult, but because he treats the craft like combat. If you're going to step into the ring, you better be ready. He survived decades in an industry that often chews up stars, especially black stars, and he did it by refusing to chase trends or beg for approval. That's real toughness. The ability to stand your ground, stay excellent, and let the work speak like thunder without ever raising your voice. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson's toughness is the kind Hollywood can't manufacture because it was forged in a fight he almost didn't survive. Born December 21, 1948 in Washington, D.C., and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Jackson came up in a world of segregation-era limits and working-class struggle. He didn't grow into toughness through fists or street legends. He grew into it through endurance. After moving to Atlanta for college, he found his voice in theater and activism, but the late 1970s and early 1980s pulled him into a darker war addiction. Jackson has been open that cocaine and heroin became daily life, and that addiction wasn't a phase, it was a trap that swallowed years of his adulthood. The turning point came in the mid-1980s, when his wife LaTanya Richardson and their young daughter found him unconscious after a near-fatal overdose. That moment wasn't just rock bottom, it was the edge of the cliff. Jackson entered rehab almost immediately, going through a brutal 28-day program that forced him to face himself without excuses. What makes this part of his story so important on a toughest actors list is simple: plenty of people hit bottom. Very few climb out, rebuild their lives, and then carry the scars into greatness. Jackson didn't just get sober, he transformed pain into fuel, and he did it quietly without turning recovery into a publicity show. Then came the role that changed everything. In 1991, Spike Lee cast him as Gator Purify in Jungle Fever, a crack addict spiraling toward destruction. Jackson didn't play Gator from imagination, he played him from memory, and the performance hit like a tremor. It was so powerful that the Cannes Film Festival created a special Best Supporting Performance Award just to honor him, reviving an award category that hadn't existed there for years. That's a rare moment in cinema. A man fights his way out of addiction, returns to the screen and delivers a performance so raw, the world's most prestigious festival bends its own rules to recognize him. From there, Jackson became unstoppable. Pulp Fiction 1994 turned Jules Winfield into a cultural icon and earned him an Oscar nomination. Over the next 3 decades, he built one of the most durable careers in film history. Die Hard with a Vengeance, Jackie Brown, Shaft, Unbreakable, Star Wars, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and as Nick Fury, the spine of the Marvel Universe. By sheer volume of major hits, he has long ranked among the highest-grossing actors ever, not because Hollywood gave him power, but because audiences trust the fire in his eyes. Samuel L. Jackson is tough because he walked through hell, came back alive, and never softened the truth of where he's been. His strength isn't about looking dangerous, it's about surviving what would have ended most people, then turning that survival into a presence so commanding that even in silence you feel the weight of a man who refuses to break. Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx earns his place in any conversation about the 10 toughest black actors in Hollywood history because his toughness isn't built on posture or mythology, it's built on real moments when life demanded courage, endurance, and fast instincts. Born Eric Marlon Bishop on December 13, 1967, in Terrell, Texas, Foxx was raised in a strict, disciplined environment that taught him early how to perform under pressure. He didn't become a star by luck or a single breakout role. He became a powerhouse by refusing to be limited comedian, singer, pianist, producer, and Oscar-winning actor. That kind of sustained excellence across multiple arenas is its own type of toughness, the long-distance kind that outlasts trends, critics, and competition. What sets Foxx apart from movie tough is that he actually trains like someone who expects real danger. For years, he took boxing seriously, not just to look sharp on screen, but to keep his body in fight-ready shape. That discipline shows up in roles driven by survival and steel nerve. In Collateral 2004, he plays a regular man pushed into chaos, and every flicker of fear, every decision to stay alive, feels honest. In Django Unchained 2012, he turns pain into purpose, carrying Django's rage and determination with the steady control of someone who understands what it means to be cornered and still move forward. Even when he's not playing a bruiser, he carries that fighter's alertness, the sense that he knows how fast life can turn. Then came a moment that proved his toughness wasn't limited to scripts. In January 2016, a vehicle crashed and flipped outside his home, bursting into flames. While bystanders froze, Foxx ran toward the fire, called for help, and worked to get the driver out of the wreck just before it was fully engulfed. Police later stated the rescue likely saved the man's life. That wasn't a publicity move. It was pure reflex, the kind of reflex that tells you who someone really is when there's no time to think, no cameras to impress, and no second take. But the hardest fight of Jamie Foxx's life came in silence. In April 2023, he suffered a sudden and severe medical emergency. He later revealed it involved a brain bleed that led to a stroke, and that he was unconscious for around 20 days. The recovery was brutal physical rehab, relearning strength fighting through uncertainty, the kind of battle that breaks many people privately. Foxx didn't just survive it, he came back. He returned not with swagger, but with gratitude and the visible steadiness of someone who has stared down the edge and chosen to live. That's why Jamie Foxx belongs on this list. His toughness isn't a character trait. It's a pattern, running toward danger instead of away from it, taking the hit life throws and standing back up when most people can't. Danny Trejo. Danny Trejo is a walking reminder that Hollywood toughness usually starts as real-life survival. And while he isn't black, he's Mexican-American. He keeps showing up in this toughest conversation. For one reason, the man's screen aura comes from battles he actually lived, not from a studio gym. Born May 16, 1944, and raised in the rough neighborhoods of Echo Park/East Los Angeles, Trejo was pulled early into gangs, drugs, and crime. He's spoken openly about starting marijuana as a kid and using heroin by around age 12. By his teens, he was in and out of juvenile halls and detention camps, then into California's prison system for armed robbery and drug offenses. His cycle of incarceration stretched through the 1960s, landing him in places like San Quentin Soledad and Folsom. Inside San Quentin, he didn't just survive, he became a feared competitor, winning the prison's lightweight and welterweight boxing titles. Prison fighting wasn't clean sport. It was the kind of violence where one wrong moment could cost your life. Trejo has described being stabbed and living in constant threat, which is why his stare on film feels less like acting and more like memory. The turning point came in 1968 when he committed to a 12-step program behind bars and chose sobriety. That decision stuck. He has remained sober for decades, and he built a second life helping others recover. After release, he worked as a drug counselor and rehab mentor. Then fate did something only Hollywood can do. It found him instead of the other way around. While helping a young client on the set of Runaway Train 1985, Trejo was recognized by screenwriter Edward Bunker, a former inmate. One prison boxer to another bunker pulled him into the film first as an extra, then as a trainer, and Trejo's face scars and all basically announced a new kind of authenticity. From there, he became the industry's go-to symbol of danger. Heat, 1995. From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996. Con Air, 1997. And later the role that turned him into a cult icon. Machete, 2010, 2013. What makes Danny Trejo tough isn't just that he plays killers and hard men. It's that he clawed his way out of an ending most people don't escape, and he now carries that truth into every frame. When Trejo looks like someone who's seen hell and walked out, he's not performing. He's remembering. In the end, whether toughness comes from the streets, the ring, the battlefield, or the battles within, one thing is certain. These legends didn't just play hard men, they earned that presence the hard way. Their stories remind us that strength isn't one-dimensional, and greatness doesn't follow a single path. But here's the debate. Which of these icons truly deserves the crown as Hollywood's toughest of all time? Drop your pick in the comments, and let's spark the conversation. This is Legends of Black Excellence, where the truth behind the legends always comes to light.